just finished listening to Yoki Lore and Fake You here on 88.1 FM WVYC. And a good afternoon to all of you. This is the voice of your college. My name is Keelan Tollinger, and you're with me for the next hour here on In the Studio. Today is Friday, March 22nd, and a pretty dreary day around York County. Very windy. The power shouldn't go out, though, but that would be a disaster for everyone involved. I mean, especially if like, you're at home somewhere off campus and your internet goes out on you, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But the first comment I want to make today is also with the weather we're having. Like, how fortunate were we yesterday with the temperatures in the 40s that everything that came down the ground was rain? I mean, like, I think the equivalent between 1 inch of rain is actually like 10 inches of snow or something. I mean, depending on how close it is to the freezing mark. But yeah, the rain is much better than anything frozen, and we'll just leave it at that. But beyond what the conditions are like outside, if you're interested in hearing any of my past shows here on WVYC, all you have to do is go online to youtube.com and search In the Studio with Keelan Tollinger, and you'll find an archive of each of my shows for you to re-listen whenever you want. But Sunday, I should do some announcements, is the big night for the spring concert. This is the electronic dance DJ, Steve Aoki, who's coming to campus for what is looking like to be a wild, energetic show. Now, the doors open at the Grumbacher Center at 7 o'clock, and the show begins at 7:30. Also keep in mind that Saturday is Accepted Students Day, when potential freshmen who have got their eyes on York College can come and learn more about the opportunities they can have here. It's a step above an open house, essentially. But what that means is that Johnson Dining Hall is going to be closed for most of the day for current students, but you'll be able to have dinner when it reopens at around 4:30. And but speaking of food, I just got done spending the early afternoon before the show at Bacon Fest. This is the big WVYC event where we hand out free BLT sandwiches and some of our swag, our promotional goods and stuff. And we had a good portion of students drop by, maybe not get our station gear, but I think we gave out about 50 to 60 sandwiches in the span of 2 hours. So it was a decent rate. It was nice seeing some people that I know drop by, and I could give them a free sandwich and stuff. But beyond that, it's just been a crazy week so far. I mean, I made a lot of potential job moves thanks to the Career Expo, which was held in the Grumbacher Center on Wednesday. I'll cover that a little bit. But also just doing a bunch of analysis work for my senior seminar research project. And again, while I can't go too far into what I found, I've been trying to answer a few questions with a survey that was sent out to all the faculty here on campus. So, what are the characteristics of good writing to these different disciplines, such as business communication, natural sciences, behavioral sciences? What are some of the genres and the forms of communication that each of these fields prioritize? And what do the faculty think about the students within these courses trying to learn these important things? What do they succeed with and what do they struggle with? And is there anything that the college curriculum can do to help them better teach communication? And just going through some of these open-ended surveys, I've got to say that it's surprising to find that it isn't very often that two professors think the same about what their students are doing. You might expect it to be like, oh, all hope is lost, they can't do anything, but in reality, there's a lot of confidence about the ability these students have to learn when they put their mind to things. Generally, these students, I think, come out a lot more educated about their discipline when a course is finished. But there is plenty of individual little complaints that could be fixed. About maybe small facets of writing or public speaking or doing research. That's going to take some time to pull them in together, all these comments, and make things relate to each other. Because it'd be pretty neat to discover things like that the business department wants more practice writing memos, so maybe the faculty development officials here or the writing center can give them a hand with some rubrics or templates for writing assignments. And I guess it's really starting to frighten me with just how quickly this all has to be brought together. In 2 weeks, I'll have to figure out how all these different threads and stories in the data are arranged. And then a week later, I'll need to write up that in the giant final paper. But it'll get there, and hopefully I don't fall further behind on things like preparing for this show. I mean, I feel like I've been caught out of the loop with all the recent news in the world this week. But I do have a fair share of talking points to still go through. So for this edition, I'll cover my experience at the Career Expo on Wednesday and why it's important for you, maybe as a student, to take advantage of. And for somebody like me who's a writer and thinking I'll be comfortable in a bunch of different circumstances, but how am I going to know it's the one that I really want to do? Then the recent executive order by President Trump to apparently protect free speech on college campuses. What might be the motivation for that? And then the Disney and Fox mega deal, another one of these rapid mergers between corporations going on. Then a cry for help put out by the Viacom Corporation to keep its family of TV channels on DirecTV, plus a little bit about Google's new video game platform. Not a console, but a platform that they're trying to develop. It's going to be one giant topic about how consumers in the future will get their entertainment. And then we'll probably finish up in space talking about research going on not some distant star, not on a planet, but an asteroid. Two of them, apparently, in an effort to find out where might the best bets for distant life be hiding. But there's actually a lot of music to get through in between. We'll start off with this recent single by a notable actor turned country singer. This is Kiefer Sutherland, the guy who used to star in the series 24. He is no longer trying to stop terrorism and is instead chasing a music career. His first album, called Down in a Hole, released in, I think, 2016 to relatively okay success. He went on to tour and sold out some small shows, but his new album coming out soon is titled Reckless and Me. Here's one of the new tracks called Something You Love, and I swear, like, even as a fan of Kiefer, I'll try to keep the country rock to a minimum. Like, this will be the only song of this type that I'll play all semester. But take a listen, and I'll be back in a few, here on WVYC. Welcome back to 88.1 FM, WVYC, the voice of your college. I'm your host, Keelan Tollinger, and that was Kiefer Sutherland, British actor and now American country singer. I think it's country. I mean, it qualifies from, like, the topics being sung about, I guess, but it's also, like, his vocals are being auto-tuned a bit on overkill. I think he's trying his hardest, at least. But like I said, he starred in the show 24 as a special counter-terrorist, but I also know him through series like Touch, which was about Kiefer playing the father of an autistic son who could see the future through, like, connected series of numbers, and the events that take place from this kid running off for random reasons all the time. It all eventually makes sense and even saves some lives. He's also been playing as the President of the United States in a series called Designated Survivor, which I think hasn't been renewed for a third season by ABC, but instead by Netflix. It's a show that's, like, based off of what the American government actually does when the president, vice president, and a whole string of natural successors are gathered in one place and maybe threatened in, like, a bombing or some other catastrophe, which actually takes place in the television's first episode of the show. I mean, making this cabinet member of housing and urban development the head of the country. Which, for as far as I watched it, started up questions like, is this guy qualified for the job or not? And I fell too far behind to catch up. But if it's on Netflix, I mean, it's all going to be there sometime for later, though, and I think I'd sooner rewatch that to support Mr. Sutherland's endeavors. But we've reached about the 3:15 mark here on In the Studio, so I'm going to get the first weather check of the hour out of the way. But anyway, on to the Career Expo. It was a busy place when I showed up at like 12 o'clock on Wednesday, 2 hours into it. I think the college hosted 110 different employers, about like half national, half local. There was a huge concentration of engineering jobs and some health services, because this is what your college is all about these days. To leave out some like the boring specifics about what I was doing, I think I can at least pass along some tips regarding what I learned just walking around. So at the very least, I mean, bring 10 general resumes with you or something. I mean, this is an event where there will be a lot of different opportunities to sell yourself than you might think. And this is just me imagining what it must be like for more lucrative majors out there than professional writing. See if you can meet up with somebody in your major, too. I mean, I think the most interesting part was I found another student who's in my program with me, and she apparently heard that there were civilian divisions of the Army and Navy looking for technical writers, of all things. An exception to, like, engineers and electricians. but they need people to write the manuals for these service members, and other than that, and next, don't be like me, like who forgets to ask for business cards when they head out and have to return to the table within a minute. That was certainly awkward. And most importantly, if you head to these expos or career fairs in the future, it helps to do your research on these companies. I had to look up some writing job ads before the expo anyway, so there were about 4 businesses I was interested in and had a chance to understand what goes on, the whole culture, and even other listings. And it was a great coincidence that 3 of the 4 I had seen online were there. They apparently like recruiting York College students, or they would never have considered attending. And just keep it on your radar for the next year or two, even if you're not a junior yet, because I'm sure if you're looking for internships, there's places that'll be more than happy to take you. But as for me, I am like at such a crossroads at what I want to do. Like, what's the right course of action when the job I went into the expo wanting the most is actually in a different headquarters across the country in Florida? I mean, do I learn how to ride out hurricanes, or do I stay in the area? And it's kind of an internal debate for me, because after some introspection on my end, I decided that there's like a bunch of different routes I can take, like advertisement copywriting, technical writing, like I said, creating procedures or manuals. There's editing and publishing opportunities. There's online things like website design and creation, or digital marketing and search engine optimization. Journalism isn't quite high on my list, but there's certain business-oriented types of blogging someone can do, like write about home improvement tips on behalf of the Home Depot for whatever is the new design fad. And I think negotiating the finer points, such as, do I want to be interacting with multiple clients and working for them, or do I want to be sort of like a radio host in a sense, picking my own topics and having the space to write about them? I guess what I'm saying is, for everyone else, is that we all have to go through this dilemma as graduates and incorporate location and work environment on top of what you want to be doing. But, I mean, to finish up, I certainly appreciated the time I took visiting the expo. And maybe you guys out there can keep an eye out for it next year. And once again, do some of that research beforehand. Attend a resume help session. Have somebody you know along with you to ask what they found. But that's just about everything I have pertaining to the career search. I'll take a break and be back in a few minutes after this next track from Intergalactic Lovers. Here's their song River on 88.1 FM. Stay tuned on In the Studio for an update on that executive order. Welcome back to 88.1 FM WVYC, the voice of your college, Intergalactic Lovers with River, and I'm your host, Keelan Tollinger. So this next topic is something that broke yesterday about this presidential executive order from Mr. Trump. And you may have seen a couple headlines that it's about preserving free speech on college campuses across the nation, but I think, judging by the mix of articles that I've read from CNN and Fox News and Vox and The Atlantic, this issue goes a little deeper than simply free speech. So President Trump announced that he was going to go through with this executive order at a gathering called the Conservative Political Action Conference earlier in March. So basically he told a crowd of conservative activists, quote, "I am proud to announce that I will be very soon signing an executive order requiring colleges and universities to support free speech if they want federal research funds. And if an institution doesn't comply or support free speech, they'll get some of their federal funding pulled, particularly in doing research, which can be carried out by doing a number of things, like in the schools that are like Penn State and across the country at all the bio labs and engineering labs. It's important now that these grounds stay balanced and don't risk losing money for projects and therefore progress. But I didn't know that the federal government gives out $35 billion a year to fund some of these operations in different schools and stuff. Now, very quickly, it's important to note that it wasn't like free speech was barred from campuses like ours or elsewhere in the first place. In fact, colleges are one of the least, policed places as to who can say what. But the gist of this is mostly that the order was a reminder. I think colleges are supposed to now be reporting how they cater to both sides of the aisle to make higher education more transparent and hold more institutions accountable, as one senior government official apparently put it. but hold them for doing what exactly? I think that's where it comes down to who this order supports, is the president's conservative college base. I think if this was announced at a conservative event, it had to be because it's the place where it would draw the most applause. But Republican students actually feel very concerned about their level of representation in these sorts of locations, actually. And that's from the emerging presence of, for instance, safe spaces, and the discouragement of triggering words and phrases, and the crackdown on offensive ideas. And when these are being set by liberal-minded administrations, I mean, honestly, that's the side of the political spectrum it caters towards. And to lock down on what would be called combative ideas is essentially calling the other side the enemy. And I know that, honestly, for us as a campus here at York College, we're probably one of the healthiest communities in the region when it comes to debating about ideologies. And really the only reason why that's the case is because we barely have any discussion about these ideas at all. I mean, maybe I'll see an event sponsored by a Democratic student club or a Republican club once every semester or maybe academic year. I mean, we're very quiet when it comes to speaking about our ideologies. And if you're not a fan of conflict or you don't particularly care for any method of activism or progress, then maybe this culture works out for you. You don't have to go for a walk across main campus and see a crowd of individuals screaming at each other about something on the quad. We don't demonstrate. But elsewhere, on some of the biggest campuses with thousands upon thousands of students attending, there are a lot of politically charged minds using a platform as wide and free as a college campus to get the word out. And then there's opposition to that, and that tries to ideologically fight back. And again, we don't see it around here, but notorious public speakers in whatever alignment they're in, they might come to some of these other campuses. But they've had a lot of pushback by the student body, which claims, like, we don't want a person who's been known to align with hate to have a voice here. And they stage protests, and they try to break things up or discourage attendance, sometimes with intimidation. And usually the way this goes is that it's a conservative voice trying to hold an event, connect with Republican students, but it conflicts with a campus which is made up of a majority of liberal minds, and intense arguments break out. I mean, instances might get so bad that the events have to be canceled to prevent a brawl when the venue opens its doors for the lecture, and I wish I had more specific examples of when this might happen, but with the low amount of coverage that I think I've been seeing about it in both sides of the media, these sorts of openly seen problems are becoming less frequent, at least in my perspective. I mean, maybe that's just me just being a part of a very quiet student body. But we do see, for instance, here, there's a lot more of a Democratic presence than a Republican one, the way I see it. So, like, in essence, all across the United States, the executive order is just a way for Trump to put a finger on the scale for his base to level things out, sort of shake up the weight. Republicans are a minority for the most part, and this is all trying to win a seat at the table for them. So when Trump was signing this order, he called it, quote, to take historic action to defend American students and American values. They are under siege. And you can easily replace American with Republican or conservative, and the message basically falls into place. And I wouldn't call myself personally affected by this one way or another, certainly not here, when there isn't much going on with any political energy. But what it might do is spread minor shockwaves through the larger campuses. Now that conservatives can claim they have to be given an equal opportunity to hold speeches, debates, lectures, and events, and liberals might want to try shouting those down in some cases with counterclaims of hateful language or white supremacy or maybe something as simple as a differing opinion. I don't know. I sure hope not. But yeah. In the end, I think what an action like this is going to ultimately do is stoke the flames of conflict a little more intensely. And 9 times out of 10, that emotion is not what I'd want if it's not going to be done peacefully, rationally, or nonpartisan. I mean, this is, or partisan, I mean. But this is just one issue in which I'm glad I won't have to be calling myself a college student anymore. I mean, like, I can graduate a level up from what all the older populations are saying, that student minds can bend as easily as aluminum foil or something. I don't know. At this point, at least, I've made up my mind about what I am. But we've reached about the 3:30 mark here on In the Studio. I think it's a good time to deliver the hourly PSA. I will take a minute to do that here. Let's get into some more music. This next one coming from the artist Tom Berlin. This one's titled 17. And I'll return in about 4 minutes to cover how the media landscape is changing here on WVYC. Stay tuned. Tom Berlin with 17 here on 88.1 FM WVYC. I'm your host, Keelan Tollinger. And let's fly through some news regarding some good old corporation deals. The major mergers just continue thanks to this $71.3 billion deal between Disney and Fox. This is a complicated one. So essentially, these two are teaming up to try and become the next big player in streaming services. So try to take away from Amazon and Netflix from taking over entertainment. So, I mean, Disney took up Fox's share of Hulu and now controls much of what it broadcasts. In addition to that, they now own the 21st Century Fox Film Studios, the FX Movies channel, the National Geographic channel, and also the European family of channels called Sky. I think they particularly do a lot of sports, but that means 3,000 Disney workers will have to be laid off, but Fox employees get a small boost in stocks on the other hand. I guess there's going to be some interesting combinations with what Disney can do with their new tools in film. So like in television, Disney now owns The Simpsons, and I cannot imagine what exactly they're going to do with that. But the Avengers, the big superhero movie franchise, they can now add the cast of the X-Men if they so desire and create an even bigger universe of good and evil. I guess I would add the loop as to how long this deal was being arranged for. I think it was announced all the way back in late 2017 about doing this buyout deal, but then Comcast interrupted in June 2018 saying, here, we can give you $65 billion if you don't go with Disney and join us, but Disney raised it to $71 billion, and here we are, and they had to get approval from different departments of countries as governments, just to make sure this wasn't like a complete monopoly, but now that there is a new Fox, that basically means the Fox Broadcast Network, some of their TV stations, Fox News and Fox Sports, will have to stay separate to prevent being completely absorbed and being deemed unfair. But what Disney wants to do is raise up its potential as a streaming service, and I heard something about Disney Plus, which I don't think has any concrete plans yet, but it might cement later on this year. And other than that, I think today is the day that DirecTV and the Viacom channels will sever their ties from each other if a deal can't be reached tonight, in fact. So I saw an ad today being ran about DirecTV is going to get rid of our stations. I mean, this is Viacom panicking through like a SpongeBob clip, saying like, if you don't do something fast, I mean, if you don't call this number and tell the big corporation of AT&T DirecTV to save our channels, yeah, basically they're doomed. So, I mean, if you aren't like totally familiar with Viacom, they're the guys who run Nickelodeon, MTV, TV Land, and Comedy Central, VH1, and the Paramount Network. Apparently they were even running this on the Nick channel with like using actors from their kids show sitcoms as well, trying to sound the alarm, and it's like, go to the Keep Viacom website, or else you'll miss the biggest night on television, the Kids' Choice Awards. Like, what are they gonna do? But I mean, in DirecTV's defense, they actually threw some shade at Viacom and said their company has lost 40% of its consumer base in the last 6 years. Now, Viacom says they're the number one cable family on DirecTV's platform for audiences like kids, teens, young adults, African Americans, and Hispanics, to which, again, DirecTV says Viacom's channels just aren't that popular anymore. And maybe if you care about seeing new SpongeBob episodes a lot, you could be freaking out about this. But once the clock strikes midnight tonight, I think if they don't come to an agreement, then those channels I listed will disappear, at least on that satellite. But moving right along to some more news in the entertainment industry. This next thing is going to be about Google deciding to square up with the giants of the video game console market with their own streaming service of sorts, called Stadia. At least I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So essentially, Google wants to turn every device into something that can play games, depending on if you have the Stadia software, and especially one of their custom controllers. But you have to play whatever you're trying to play online, because the game basically isn't yours. It exists with Google's servers, and they're acting as sort of the middleman, the mirror between the system processing what's happening with the game and sending that display to any screen of your choice. So think of it like you're watching the events of a game unfold. You press buttons. It sends those over the internet to Google servers. Then it computes what you pressed and sends those results back as quick as it can, so it seems like you're controlling things in real time. But it really isn't. I mean, to me, it just seems like there would be a lot of lag between what I would press and when I'd get a reaction to that. And you need a very, very high-speed internet to send and receive the data, the controller inputs, the graphic display. And maybe there's going to be a sense of convenience in the fact that you can rent a game like you do a movie off of Netflix, and you can interact with it anywhere. But unless the Wi-Fi spot you're using is top of the line, you might as well be giving yourself motion sickness in the time it takes to like push a button and expect something to be moving. And when you don't have to like go through the internet to accomplish these things, and the reactions happen like lightning with like home consoles, I think that's a bit of a better solution. And just the main thing is that any bit of delay is just going to be a source of frustration for people. But we'll see how it goes with the Stadia. But I don't think it can replace something like the Xbox or the PlayStation or the Switch that quickly, because not everyone's going to have the speedy internet to play this system correctly. But that's it for this rundown on entertainment and technology for this week, I guess, and a lot of different ways we as consumers are getting digital content delivered to us. But it's time now for another break and another song. This one is titled 17. And though I just played 17 from Tom Berlin, this particular 17 is performed by Youth Lagoon. And when I come back, I'll do a quick story about what's going on in space research millions and millions of miles away when I come back on In the Studio. Stay tuned. Welcome back to In the Studio with Keelan Tollinger here on 88.1 FM WVYC. Youth Lagoon with 17. And we're going to take a break to get into the weather check for this hour, the second one. So to finish up the news today on In the Studio, I wanted to cover some space technology really quick. There's two different missions going on involving spacecraft orbiting asteroids. It doesn't seem too interesting, but this is an experiment to find out where all the big matter comes from. Like, asteroids collide with each other on their orbits around the sun and other stars and formed planets like ours long ago, so what's the recipe inside these large flying boulders? It was interesting to me that a pair of space agencies were able to get machines orbiting around these asteroids as they sail through empty space, just like how the moon orbits the Earth. We'll start with the Hayabusa 2 mission, being run by Japan's JAXA Space Agency. And what they found on the asteroid Ryugu, so it's shaped like a spinning top, apparently. And its color is even blacker than coal. And the spacecraft has been doing its observations of the asteroid for a few months now, and I found it amazing that it landed on this rotating rock as it moves like tens of thousands of miles per hour, and they were able to fire a tiny little bullet into the asteroid just to kick up some dust and collect it with a small vacuum or something. They called it a sample horn. And somehow this Hayabusa craft is going to be following this object for some time, taking photos of it, and measuring its size until I guess they can pilot it back to Earth by 2020. And that's just so cool that they have the precision to be able to do that. What they found already from this Ryugu asteroid is that it has a lot less water than they expected. They used a comparison like you set out on an expedition to find the world's largest elephant, and you come up with the smallest one instead and need to find out how it got so small. Because now the question is, did this asteroid break off a dry planet some 100 million years ago? They said that is pretty young for an asteroid to be 100 million years old. But maybe they'll be able to answer how an asteroid loses its water with any luck. But it'll all just depend on if they can get these samples from the tiny bullet and vacuum collection they did. But there's a second mission going on just like the Hayabusa 2, and it's run by NASA instead. This one is called OSIRIS-REx, and this particular asteroid they've managed to lock onto is named Bennu. It's out there 70 million miles away, but it'll eventually pass closer than the moon is to the Earth in 2135. So even though it's probably not going to strike the planet, we'd still like to study it to figure out like what type of dynamite should we use if we're going to try and like deflect it or something like centuries down the line. But all the way back in January is when this spacecraft first started to study and orbit this rock, and they've been able to detect there are like small particles being shot out of its surface. It's why they've called it an active asteroid. It basically has volcanoes or something firing off of itself, and some of these rocks either drift away or they get fired out in different directions. Others are so slow that they come back onto the asteroid, and others start to actually orbit it like satellites. And NASA has no idea why this is happening. But compared to the Ryugu asteroid, there's a lot more water and different minerals inside of it. It's also older by comparison, ranging from 100 million to 1 billion years old, so give or take an eternity. And instead of being one single object, Bennu is made up of a cluster of giant boulders that its total width alone is the height of the Empire State Building. And I just have no idea, like, how they're able to keep steering a spacecraft around this thing when it's apparently moving 63,000 miles per hour. They haven't been able to land OSIRIS-REx on the surface of this asteroid yet because it's so uneven and rocky, but they're also hoping to bring back samples in 2023. It'll still spend 2 more years studying this rock, and at the very least I hope they figure out why it's shooting little pieces of dust on a regular basis. But yeah, 2 missions that are a first of its kind. They're going on simultaneously about collecting samples from moving asteroids, and that's some science and technology news for this hour. And we're just about ready to close things out, but there might be one more song in the mix. So here's one from the group The Pains of Being Pure at Heart, a song titled My Only. I'll be back in a bit to do the outro here on 88.1 FM. Stay tuned. The Pains of Being Pure at Heart here on 88.1 FM, WVYC, the voice of your college. My name is Keelan Tollinger, and that'll finish up the show for this week on WVYC. You can go to youtube.com and search In the Studio with Keelan Tollinger to hear archived versions of each and every edition, all the monologuing without the music. And I hope that next week I can share some news about the 50 days till graduation celebration going on Thursday night, and what the class of 2019 is putting inside of a time capsule. It should be pretty interesting. But thank you for tuning in. I always appreciate you spending your Friday afternoon on WVYC. We will leave off here with Strand of Oaks and their song Radio Kids. Take care, everybody, and have a great weekend.